Hello and welcome. I'm Rami Niranjan Desai, and this is the first series of interviews that I will be doing with key policymakers and influencers in the critical Australia India relationship, which is possibly one of the most important strategic and people to people relationships in the Indo Pacific. The Indo-Pacific is going to be a main area where geopolitics is going to play out in the next century. And the India-Australia relationship is going to define many things in this region. Today, I am speaking to Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha, a retired three-star of the Indian Navy. He is a great friend, a mentor of mine, and more importantly, is considered an expert on matters related to the Indian Ocean region. He has been a part of several track two dialogues between Australia and India on defense issues. So, welcome, Admiral Sinha. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. I'd like to begin by asking you that, there's so much that has been said about cricket, curry, and commerce between the two countries, the three C's. And, it's traditionally run the India Australia ties. Would you say that the security cooperation between the two countries is equally important today, or even more so?
Ramiji, thank you very much for getting me on your this recording for a video interview. I really appreciate and I'm thankful to you. You mentioned about three C's and the fourth C. I can assure you that the fourth C is going to be as important in cooperation, particularly in the maritime domain. You rightly in your introduction, you mentioned that it is going to be a geopolitical sort of canvas on which these two countries are going to play. And the world is actually in a political churn, if you like. Entire geopolitical canvas is in a state of flux, to say the least. The existing international order, which has remained so since the end of Cold War, it is under challenge. And I must say very openly that it is under challenge by the rise of China and Russia-Ukraine conflict. These two have had profound impact on the global systems, which was sort of just about beginning to recover economically from the crisis of the pandemic. Also, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has reduced the attention of the bigger powers, the contesting powers, towards the Indo-Pacific. But I must say that the India's interest and Australia's interest, they are intentionally locked in the maritime domain, and we don't have any direct indulgence with the continental warfare which is going on. Though the compulsions are more political and diplomatic because of we being partners in Quad, and Australia being even closer. They are sort of in alliance with the United States of America. The US has issued a national strategy paper only yesterday, national security strategy, and it says that US will and its allies will continue to foster the Indo-Pacific part, in addition to their attention on the Russian and Ukrainian conflict. I would believe that these countries out of four in the Quad really do not have any direct geopolitical involvement, and therefore it is mostly posturing, and this is exactly Australia and India fully understand. Therefore, the cooperative mechanism of Australia and India and possibly Japan, becomes a very mainstay for the peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. We have spoken about middle power forming a pole by itself in this multipolar world, spoken on the forums where the Australia was a very main component with India and possibly Japan and Indonesia. So I think that these two countries are very important. And if you take Japan also on board for maintaining the free and open sea trade and commerce between in the Indo-Pacific. And if you look at the map, and if you look at the map upside down, you will find that nothing stops, the flow of trade over the oceans between India and Australia. And I think that we have realized this, and we are going to be very important partnership, particularly in maritime security, ensuring the free and open trade between two countries, and ensuring a similar thing for the rest of the world.
Absolutely, Admiral Sinha, free and open Indo-Pacific has been a matter of concern for both the countries, and our navies have also come closer and created a lot of trust-building exercises in the recent times. But what do you think is the future potential for further cooperation between the two navies?
Ramiji, I think that's a very pointed question. And in the given geopolitical flux, these two countries will have to occasionally take a line which is not dictated by any other geopolitical compulsion, but the compulsions of the free and open sea, as you rightly said. To my mind, there are two sort of developments which actually point in the direction that the navies and the two countries will be really cooperating much more. The first one is the 2+2 agreement, which was signed, by then Prime Minister Scott Morrison and our Prime Minister in a very hurriedly conducted visit. And this 2+2 actually says it all, because we only have right now with US and now with Australia. Japan is, I would say, on a short final. Possibly it will happen anytime, and that will complete the entire Quad countries to have the 2+2. It is just like LEMOA, the BECA, the OMCASA, in which the two countries are free to utilize, if situation so demands, their ports, their airports, their military facilities to support the operation in connection with the free and open sea in the Indo-Pacific. Because if you see the distances, they're too large, and these two countries don't have bases in any foreign country. But doing this agreement, it gives you the possibility of using each other's port whenever ships and aircraft of these two countries are operating, in the opposite parts of the world, in the sense that in the Pacific or in the Indian Ocean. So I think 2+2 is a very important. There's intelligence sharing, and that is helping the Maritime Domain Awareness Network. Shortly, there is going to be Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Network, in which the India Center in Gurugram, the Fusion Center in Singapore, and the Australian Center, which is manned by Australia, run by Australia in Solomon Islands. These three will be linked by a space network. $5 billion have been committed. And I think that this is a basic framework or a basic structure which is required for a maritime security for future. Because once you find who's where, what do you do when they're not law abiding? So these two countries will have the responsibility of reaching out to that place. So I think that this is one very important area that I would say that which is going to work very well for us. The second important partnership is the free trade agreement between India and Australia. And that gives us a lot of room for manufacturing items related to sustenance of the defense platforms in both countries. Now we have a lot of interoperability. For example, the Australians and us, we both operate P8I aircraft, the maritime patrol aircraft, and India has a very big MRO plant in India for the repair and servicing of the P8I. So that is one area where I think that we are going to see more action. So I think that the two navies are really going to be working very closely. It's already happening. You must have seen that during the Amrit Mahotsav, our ships were operating out of Australia. Australian ships called on Indian ports very recently, and now they will be visiting each other's military ports. The procedures are being worked now that they are part of Malabar. There is also ASEAN bilateral cooperation. So I see a very good scope for future cooperation and increasing cooperation in this field.
You've also spoken about the role of the African states in the Indian Ocean. And you were recently, and I remember speaking to you just after you attended the Indian Ocean Defense and Security Conference in Perth, which was a very long flight for you because I think you traveled from the US, and clearly very important for you to attend, and therefore you'd made this long journey from the US. But you spoke about the role that African nations can play in forming this sort of security framework in the Indian Ocean. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? What did you mean by that, and how is that possible?
Well, thank you for sort of digging deep into this visit of mine. Well, it was worth a long flight going to Australia. This was their first Indian Ocean Defense and Security Conference hosted by the government of Western Australia, which is actually looking towards the Indian Ocean. As you know, that Australia is a very live example of Indo-Pacific, really. Pacific being on its east coast and Indian Ocean being on its west coast. Uh, Ramiji, what he's saying is actually it is a very long-term, a long-distance call, meaning that the Australians are contributing a great deal in development of the African countries, particularly on the east coast, and so are the Indian government, investing its capital in the Pacific Islands, which are very close to Australia. So I think that what possibly needs to be done, and I'm sure something will happen on this, that in this bilateral cooperative mechanism between two countries, we should continue to build the capacities and capabilities of these not so well-to-do countries, so that tomorrow they should be able to take care of their own maritime and coastal security. Right now, they are not. For example, Indian Navy or India is the first responder in the Indian Ocean, which includes the African sort of countries, where we always go and provide them help. We also do their survey of the sea, what is called the naval hydrography. We have an understanding. We do their easier patrolling of many countries, and the Australians are very much there, but they are more in, shall I say, an economic support. And similarly, there has been attention of Indian government towards the Pacific Island. So what the suggestion that I made in Perth was that both countries must exchange notes on as to what India is doing in the Pacific Island countries and what the Australians are doing in the East African countries, so that the effort is not sort of duplicated, and both countries know as to what help has already been given, what capacity and capability building has been done by India in the Pacific and by the Australians in the east coast of Africa. So that can actually double the progress of development in both these countries. When I say development, I mean that the capabilities of maritime security, and whatever work the one country can do in the other side, if it is well known to the country in the neighborhood, then we are looking at also making some kind of framework of the HADR type of response system. Like for example, if Australian ships are in the Arabian Sea and there is a HADR type of situation in the East African, and Indian ships are not in the area, as the ASEAN chapter of HADR standard operating procedure, Australian ships could attend to that. We already have a SOP. The Indian Navy will exchange this standard operating procedure with the Australian Navy. And not to forget that while we are doing this capacity and capability building of these countries who are not capable, we also must develop our own capacity, because it's not infinite. If some of the ships, submarines, and aircraft are engaged in these tasks, it doesn't mean that your own maritime security is going to be it should not be compromised. And therefore, for example, Australians are going ahead with the making of the nuclear submarine. They're increasing the number of ships they're having, and so are the Indian Navy, so that you have more assets to deploy in the areas that you just spoke about.
Right, right, Admiral Sinha. I think, that sort of exercise also, if you're talking about intelligence sharing, these kind of exercises will also build confidence towards intelligence sharing between these two countries. It's a new relationship which has really taken off in the last 7, 8 years, I would say. But having said that, could you talk a little bit about where exactly could we cooperate on defense manufacturing between the two countries?
We had a full session, down under in Perth, and the suggestions that just look at it, look at the Australia geography. They have been quite far removed from any continent really, and they have by and large been wanting to be self-sufficient in supporting those platforms which are operational at sea. And that is one area where I see that there is a lot of scope, meaning that if the Australian ships, the platforms are regular visitors to Indian Ocean, or the Indian ships and aircraft are regular visitors to, let's say, the Pacific, then logistics support of these two platforms of two countries, we should be in a condition to support them in their area of operation. For example, Australian ships are being supported in Indian Ocean. And for that, the best way to do is that, we should have some commonality of equipment that we have, and which we are heading in that direction. It's not that we are far away. There is fair amount of interoperability, but from interoperability, we want to move to interchangeability. Now, that interchangeability is what it means is that if Indian ship is deployed on some mission in Pacific, Australians are fully aware because we share intelligence, and there is some kind of maintenance issue for which an Indian ship has to take to harbor. The Australian ship should be able to replace and do the same task, while also the local industry helping meet those requirements of maintenance and repair in Australia, and likewise in the reverse. Ramiji, recently, the Larsen and Toubro, the port, rather the shipyard in Kattupalli in Tamil Nadu, they have just taken the first American logistics ship for a refit. This is a very, very big development. It means that the ecosystem in India is able to support ship repair and ship, what is called the refit is not an easy thing. We are talking about requiring industry know-how, smaller industry, MSME, and they should be capable of manufacturing those items which require replacement because of their aging, because of their cycles of operation. And that is where I sense that both countries have a lot to do. The second part that I suggested, I don't know how much is going to work. The Australians have signed this agreement of AUKUS with the United States and the British. And of course, it is a very highly classified part. But I'm really thankful to them for having invited me to attend their roundtable. I made a point that while nobody is asking for details of how to go about supporting logistics support and spare support, but I did make a mention that while Australia has the advantage of support of US and the UK for making this, India didn't have support of anything except for the diagrams from Russia to make our own nuclear submarine. So we went about making our nuclear submarine. We started making the components first, Rami, and therefore, by the time the submarine was operational, we had all the wherewithal to support it, and which it is happening. You see the support system, we don't depend on anybody. So what my suggestion was that possibly the medium and small enterprises of Australia could link up with the Indian MSMEs who are involved in looking at, how did they go about it, just to know how, as to how do you go about it. You don't have to really share data, but what are the industrial inputs, what are the manufacturing developments which they have to do, and that sharing is basically a what is called a blueprint for their future. So I think that both in the areas of ship support and submarine support and aircraft support, we have a lot in which we are going to be working. And this is also going to assist the defense production, both India making Atmanirbhar and also Australia has a lot of science and technology related development, and we need that. We have the skill. We have a lot of skilled people, particularly in software industry. You know that we are the world leaders in software industry. So I think that there is so much that can happen that it's endless, and we can have a separate sort of talk on this. And I think there is going to be one on 17th where the Australian High Commission is hosting one at ORF, and thankfully, they've invited me, so I'll go and make my comment there as well on Monday. So I think there is a lot which can happen.
Excellent suggestions, and that is a huge scope that we can look forward to in the future. But as we're running a little short of time now, let me come to my last question, because we can't end this conversation without talking about the Pacific, where, of course, Australia always has had a deep interest, and India has a growing footprint. Now, how do you see these two countries cooperating in the region?
I think this is shall I say, diplomatically, politically, militarily loaded question, and I appreciate you having asked this question. But let me try and sort of make things a little easier as I understand. The economic coercion of China is here for the world to see, and their targets are always smaller and less capable countries. For example, the Pacific Islands or the island states in the Indian Ocean littoral. And therefore, jointly, we should be able to offer something more lucrative to these countries, and not alone, both countries together, to make sure that they don't fall prey to the economic coercion of this big country, which always has, shall I say, dual use sort of purpose in mind. For example, the 99-year lease to Hambantota, though it is being shown as totally economic, but there is nothing only economic as far as China is concerned. Similarly, in the Solomon Islands, they have just signed an agreement with the Chinese, and that is too close to home as far as Australia is concerned. So I think that both democracy and being the robust sort of partners in Indo-Pacific, we have 2+2 arrangement. It is incumbent on our part, and we are all, that shall I say, the middle power of the world and the leaders of the middle power. We must not leave everything for the US only to take care of. We are there now economically. We are there now militarily to support these countries, both economically and militarily. And that is where India's interests lie in the Pacific, as far as Indo-Pacific security is concerned. And for that to happen, I think both countries have to come together, both for the Indian Ocean littorals here, or maybe the African coast, as you brought that question earlier. And both of us together can hasten the process, because, two is better than one, as far as the, the cooperative mechanisms are concerned. So I think that, firstly, I always fall back on Prime Minister Modi's acronym of SAGAR, the security and growth for all in the region. And there, I mentioned about this, that you are as strong as your neighbors are, as far as the capability, militarily, security is concerned, or economy is concerned. So it is better to intertwine these smaller countries into your economic framework, into your security framework. And now that it is possible that between Australia and India, we will link by satellite, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, and therefore we can both do much to support these island countries in a larger interest of free and open trade in Indo-Pacific.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Admiral Sinha, for your time and for this very comprehensive overview on the developing relations between India and Australia, and really the sheer potential of it. I really do appreciate you coming on our show. We will also be bringing out many such interviews with key people and experts to help everyone understand the potential and the future developments between the India-Australia relationship between these two very important democracies in the world, and the friendship that is such a potential between the two countries. I am Rami Niranjan Desai. Thanks for watching, and please do feel free to subscribe and add to our show. Thank you.
Thank you.